There's a pattern showing up across rural West Virginia that's hard to explain at first glance. Solid houses, real mountain acreage, prices that look like someone dropped a zero by accident, and they're sitting on the market for months without a single serious offer. So today we're touring 10 of them, 10 real houses with real land that are somehow still available in 2026. We'll walk the house, walk the property, and for everyone, I'll tell you exactly why it hasn't sold. A few of these reasons are genuinely specific to mountain living, so stick around, because the last property on this list has a quirk that only really makes sense once you understand how rural power actually works out here. If you like finding out what your money can still buy out in the country, go ahead and subscribe, because we do this every week. Number 1, the Allegheny Highlands. We're starting up in the Allegheny Highlands of eastern West Virginia, a region of high elevation, cool summers, and some of the most dramatic mountain scenery in the state. This house is a single-story ranch built in the early 1980s, right around 1,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It's been kept up well, a newer metal roof, updated windows, and a covered front porch that looks straight out toward a ridgeline in the distance. Inside, it's simple and comfortable. An eat-in kitchen with newer cabinets, a living room with a wood-burning fireplace, and bedrooms that stay naturally cool even in summer thanks to the elevation. Nothing here needs immediate work. Out back, just over 11 acres, mostly wooded with a cleared section around the house. There's a small barn and a stretch of steep hillside behind the property that climbs toward the ridge. The Highlands region draws visitors for hiking, skiing, and cooler summer temperatures than most of the state sees. The nearest town has the basics covered, with a larger regional hub a comfortable drive away. So why is a mountain retreat on 11 wooded acres still sitting? A geotechnical assessment flagged a portion of the steep hillside behind the house as having moderate slope stability concerns, the kind of thing common throughout mountainous West Virginia, where certain soil and rock layers can shift slightly after heavy rain. The house itself sits on stable, level ground well clear of the flagged area, and no actual movement has ever been recorded on this specific property. But that disclosure alone is enough to make lenders ask extra questions and buyers assume the risk is bigger than it actually is. Property taxes run around $600 a year. The house, the barn, the 11 acres, all of it for $119,000. If a slope disclosure sounds manageable, the next property's obstacle runs right through the middle of the land itself, buried a few feet underground. Number 2, the Mid-Ohio Valley. Down in the Mid-Ohio Valley, along West Virginia's western border, there's a farmhouse on 10 acres that checks nearly every box for classic country living. Built in the 1950s and well-maintained since, it's a solid 2-story home, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, right around 1,800 square feet, with a covered porch running the width of the front. The kitchen was updated about 7 years back, and most of the original hardwood floors have been refinished. There's a wood-burning stove for backup heat and central air for summer. A detached garage and an older but usable barn round out the property. The 10 acres are mostly open pasture with a line of trees along the back edge. It's flat, workable ground, unusual for this part of the state where most acreage tends toward hillside. The Ohio Valley region here is close to Parkersburg for shopping and services, with the nearby small town covering everyday needs. So why hasn't this sold? A natural gas pipeline right-of-way crosses the back third of the property, part of a larger regional transmission network that's been in place for decades. The pipeline itself is buried and well outside the useful, cleared portion of the land, but the corridor shows up clearly on the plat map, and a lot of buyers see pipeline easement and assume it restricts far more of the property than it actually does. In reality, it affects a narrow strip along the back boundary and nothing else. Taxes run about $800 a year. The house, the barn, the 10 acres, all of it for $129,000. A pipeline corridor along the back edge is a common trade-off in this part of the state. But the next property's restriction involves something that's actually standing on the land, not buried beneath it. Number 3, southern West Virginia coalfields. Deep in the coalfield hills of southern West Virginia, there's a property on 15 acres of genuinely gorgeous, steep, forested ground that's been overlooked for a reason tied to the region's timber history. The home is a comfortable, double-wide manufactured house on a permanent foundation. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, around 1,400 square feet, installed in the early 2000s and well-maintained. It sits on a cleared bench partway up the hillside, with the land rising steeply behind it, thick with mature hardwoods. The coalfield region is close-knit and scenic, with a small town nearby offering the basics and a larger regional hub within a reasonable drive. So why is this one still sitting? A previous owner sold the standing timber rights to a logging company back in the 1990s under an agreement that technically remains active for select portions of the property, meaning that company retains the legal right to harvest certain mature trees in specific sections at some point, though no logging activity has occurred in over a decade and none is currently planned. For a buyer who just wants the land as it is today, this changes very little in practice, but the idea that someone else has a legal claim to trees on their own property is enough to make a lot of buyers uneasy without digging further into how limited and dormant that right actually is. Taxes run around $500 a year. The house, the 15 acres, all of it for $94,000. A dormant timber rights agreement is unsettling to read about, but rarely comes up in practice. But the next property's issue has nothing to do with paperwork at all, and everything to do with getting a signal. Number 4, the Potomac Highlands. Up in the Potomac Highlands of eastern West Virginia, there's a ranch home on 9 acres with mountain views that would normally command a real premium. Built in the early 1990s, right around 1,300 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, with an open living and kitchen area and a covered deck that looks out over a valley. It's move-in ready, with a newer roof and updated flooring throughout. The 9 acres are mostly wooded and sloped, with a cleared section around the house and genuinely striking views in more than one direction. The Highlands region draws visitors for outdoor recreation and is popular with people looking to escape bigger cities, though cell and internet infrastructure here has lagged behind more developed parts of the state. So why is a home with views like this still sitting unsold? There's no reliable cell signal at the house itself, and broadband internet hasn't reached this particular stretch of road, leaving satellite internet as the only realistic option. For a growing number of buyers who work remotely, that's an immediate deal breaker, regardless of how beautiful the property is, and it's quietly become one of the biggest filters in rural real estate over the past several years. The view sells itself. The connectivity gap empties the buyer pool before anyone even schedules a showing. Taxes run about $700 a year. The house, the 9 acres, the views, all of it for $109,000. A connectivity gap is a real limitation for some buyers and a total non-issue for others. But the next property's obstacle is a lot more literal, getting to it at all in bad weather. Number 5, the New River Gorge region. Near the dramatic New River Gorge in southern West Virginia, there's a cabin on 13 acres of steep, wooded mountain ground that's been quietly passed over because of how the road to it actually works. Built in the late 1990s, this is a genuine log-style home. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, right around 1,400 square feet, heated primarily by wood stove. The 13 acres are almost entirely wooded, dropping steeply toward a hollow, with excellent hunting terrain and a small creek along the lower boundary. The gorge region draws serious tourism for whitewater rafting and rock climbing, and the nearby small town benefits from steady visitor traffic well beyond what its size would suggest. So why is this one still sitting? The final stretch of road leading to the property is a county-recognized right-of-way, but isn't on the state's maintained road list, meaning it doesn't receive routine snow plowing or grading the way a state highway would. Neighbors along the same stretch typically coordinate informally to keep it passable, and it's never actually stranded anyone for more than a day or two, even in a bad winter. But not state-maintained is exactly the kind of phrase that makes buyers picture worse conditions than what's actually typical. Taxes run around $400 a year. The cabin, the 13 acres, all of it for $84,000. An unmaintained road sounds worse on paper than it tends to be in practice here. But the next property's quirk is something almost nobody thinks to check until it's already causing headaches which county they actually live in. Number 6. The Eastern Panhandle. Out in West Virginia's Eastern Panhandle, closer to the D.C. metro area than most of the rest of the state, there's a farmhouse on 12 acres priced well below what the location alone would suggest. Built in the early 1900s and maintained steadily, it has real character, original wood floors, tall ceilings, and a wraparound porch, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, close to 2,100 square feet. The kitchen was updated within the last decade, and the systems have been modernized while the character features were preserved. The 12 acres are mostly open pasture with a small pond and a barn. So why is a farmhouse this close to the D.C. corridor still sitting unsold? The property sits directly on a county line, with the house itself in one county and roughly a third of the acreage in the neighboring county, which means the property is subject to 2 different tax assessments and falls into a school district boundary that's genuinely ambiguous under current zoning, requiring a formal determination that the current owner has started but not finished. It's a solvable administrative situation, but buyers with school-age kids in particular get uneasy at the idea of not knowing for certain which district they'll actually be assigned to. Taxes run a combined total of about $1,700 a year across both counties. The house, the pond, the 12 acres, all of it for $164,000. A county line ambiguity is a paperwork problem with a real timeline to resolve it. But the next properties issue involves a very different kind of governing body, the Army Corps of Engineers. Number 7. The Elk River Valley. Along the Elk River Valley in central West Virginia, there's a ranch home on 8 acres near a large flood control reservoir managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and that proximity is the whole reason behind the price. Built in 1988, right around 1,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, with an attached garage. It's clean and comfortable, with newer flooring and an updated kitchen. The 8 acres are mostly open, gently sloped, well above any recorded flood line from the reservoir's history. The Elk River Valley is scenic and popular with anglers and boaters given the reservoir's recreational uses nearby. So why is a move-in ready home on 8 acres still sitting unsold? The property falls within the dam's designated inundation zone, the theoretical area that engineers model would be affected in the extremely unlikely event of a catastrophic dam failure, a standard planning designation required for essentially every property within a certain radius of any Army Corps reservoir in the country. It triggers a specific flood insurance requirement for finance purchases, separate from a normal floodplain designation, and the unfamiliar terminology alone tends to alarm buyers more than the actual, statistically minuscule risk warrants. Taxes run about $800 a year. The house, the 8 acres, all of it for $114,000. An inundation zone designation is a standard planning formality more than a real red flag. But the next properties issue is a lot simpler and comes straight out of the tap. Number 8. Central West Virginia Hill Country. In the hill country of central West Virginia, there's a farmhouse on 10 acres that's been overlooked for a reason buyers can literally taste the moment they turn on the faucet. Built in the 1960s, right around 1,600 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, comfortably updated with newer windows and a newer roof. The 10 acres are mostly open, with a stretch of woods along the back and a small barn. Central West Virginia's hill country is quiet and largely agricultural, with a small nearby town covering the basics. So why is this one still sitting? The property's well water has naturally high mineral content, mostly iron and sulfur, common throughout parts of West Virginia's geology, giving the water a faint rotten egg smell straight from the tap until it passes through a filtration system. The current owners have a whole house filtration setup installed and working well, and filtered water tastes completely normal. But buyers touring the home before the filtration explanation sinks in sometimes catch a whiff during a showing and assume something's fundamentally wrong with the water supply, rather than understanding it's a manageable, common regional mineral issue. Taxes run about $500 a year. The house, the 10 acres, the barn, all of it for $99,000. A filtration system solves the water issue completely, but the smell during a showing is a tough first impression to overcome. The next property's access situation involves a different kind of periodic visitor altogether. Number 9. The Monongahela Highlands. Up in the Monongahela Highlands, near Morgantown, there's a wooded property on 17 acres where the timber history isn't severed rights this time, but an active, recorded logging access easement. The home is a simple, solid cabin built in the 1980s, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, around 1,100 square feet, heated by wood stove with propane backup. The 17 acres are mostly mature forest, with excellent hunting terrain and a small creek. The Highlands region near Morgantown benefits from the university town's economy and amenities being within a reasonable drive. So why is this one still sitting? A logging company holds a recorded easement, allowing periodic access across a back corner of the property roughly once every 10 to 15 years to harvest timber from an adjacent parcel they own. An arrangement set up decades ago that has almost no impact on daily life, but does mean, once every decade or so, logging trucks briefly use a stretch of the property's own access road for a few weeks. It's a minor, infrequent inconvenience in exchange for land that's otherwise entirely private, but the idea of a stranger's legal right to periodically cross the property is enough to make cautious buyers move on. Taxes run about $600 a year. The cabin, the 17 acres, all of it for $104,000. A once-a-decade logging easement is a minor trade-off most owners barely notice. But the very last property has a quirk tied to how electricity actually gets to some of the most rural parts of this state. Number 10. The Rural Electric Cooperative Belt. And here's the last one. Out in a stretch of rural West Virginia served by a member-owned electric cooperative rather than a standard investor-owned utility. And understanding how that works explains the whole story behind this property's price. The home is a cozy, single-story cottage built in the 1970s, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, around 1,000 square feet, with an updated kitchen and a covered porch. The property sits on just under 7 acres, mostly wooded with a cleared section around the house, quiet and private. The surrounding area is served by a rural electric cooperative, a common and generally reliable setup throughout much of Appalachia, where residents are technically members of the utility rather than simply customers. So why is a cozy cottage on 7 private acres still sitting unsold? Connecting to the cooperative requires a one-time membership buy-in fee, separate from the normal utility deposit most buyers expect. And while it's a modest cost in the grand scheme of a home purchase, buyers unfamiliar with how electric cooperatives work sometimes discover this fee late in the process and feel blindsided by an expense nobody warned them about up front. It's a completely standard part of buying property in a co-op service area, but the surprise factor alone has caused more than one deal in this region to stall out over what amounts to a few $100s. Taxes run under $400 a year. The cottage, the 7 acres, all of it for $69,000. So there's the list. 10 West Virginia properties, 10 completely different reasons they're still on the market, and not one of them because the house itself was actually the problem. A slope stability note on a hillside nobody's building on. A pipeline corridor along a back fence line. Dormant timber rights nobody's exercising. A broadband gap. An unmaintained back road. A county line splitting a school district. A dam's theoretical inundation zone. Water that just needs a filter. A once-a-decade logging truck, and a membership fee nobody explained clearly enough up front. That's the real pattern behind almost every underpriced property out there. It's rarely the house. It's almost always something quiet in the details that most buyers never bother to ask a follow-up question about. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 you'd actually buy, and if you want more of these every week, go ahead and hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.